They will. All right, everybody, welcome. That's slowly joining. We're going to get started here in a minute. I'm going to do like I've been doing, just play a quick little 3-minute video, which I found to be inspiring. And then we'll jump on the call with John. So at 12 straight up, I'll start this and then we'll jump right into it. So thanks everybody for coming. Great to see names of people and those faces that are showing faces. So hope everyone's having a great day. Anyway, I like that. I like stuff like that, especially in times like now. Hold on, let me quit that video. Anyway, all right, cool. So when life gives you lemons, let's make lemonade, right? John, how you doing?
I'm great, man. Really excited to be here.
Cool, awesome. Well, as everyone files in here, we're going to get started with John. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about what I know of John, if you guys don't know John. And then I'm going to have him correct me and fill in where I got it wrong. So I have had the pleasure of knowing John for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I can't really remember, but I first came across John, you know, while I was fulfilling some loan requests for different borrowers. And all of a sudden I had like 5 or 6, well, maybe it wasn't that many. It was like 2 or 3 back-to-back loan requests from borrowers that were getting contracts assigned to them from this guy named John Prince, you know? And I'm like, who is John Prince? Because I hadn't really ever met John yet, but John was getting all these deals under contract from the MLS and setting them up to be assigned and then, you know, assigning them to, you know, flippers or whatever, buying them. And so these guys were coming to me for loans. And so I remember talking to John and I'm like, John, this is how we do our loans, you know, or you're cool kind of closing the way we close, just, you know, following our process. And very agreeable. And I could tell from day one that, you know, he was all about getting deals done. and not necessarily putting up a lot of roadblocks or friction, not only for, his borrowers or buyers or the people that they were working with. So that was my first experience with John. This is something we're going to talk about, was how he was successful doing that. And since then, just networked with John, gotten to know him. We've been in a couple little mastermind groups. I was able to, go on a little trip about a year ago with John to LA, which was fun. We went to a Dodgers game and a private, hard money conference. And since doing the wholesales, I mean, John will talk to this, but he's done a lot of different stuff, but he's kind of transitioned into, assembling different little parcels of land in unique strategic locations to maximize value with a larger development deal with either townhomes or apartments or stuff like that. So anyway, John, welcome. Thanks again for joining on. Why don't you fill in the gaps? Give us a little bit of your brief bio and, kind of your story as far as how you got started in real estate and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I was working a corporate job basically since I graduated college from BYU. I got my degree in business management with an emphasis in entrepreneurship. And I was always interested in real estate, but I had a corporate job. So I was doing the corporate job full time. Then I started listening to Bigger Pockets and thought my corporate job was actually a software company that makes property management software.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so my original thought was, hey, I've got free access to this really sophisticated property management software. I should build a property management company. So I kind of put on Bigger Pockets that, hey, I do property management. And I was really going out and trying to get management contracts. And I met this guy who said, well, hey, like, I'm not really necessarily interested in that, but I am looking for flips. And my mind was, I had never even thought about flips. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, tell me more about what you're looking for. And anyways, he told me, kind of, hey, I'm looking for these types of distressed properties. So I thought, hey, I'll give it a shot. So I started bird dogging for him a little bit. And we had the understanding that if we found a deal, he would bring the money, I would do some of the hustling, and we'd split it 50-50.
And where did you find him? Was it like an ad you posted or cold call? Like, how did your message get to him?
Yeah, I think I had posted an ad on Bigger Pockets.
Oh, yeah, that's what you said. Sorry, Bigger Pockets.
And then he said, hey, we should meet up.
Got it.
So I started going, I got a list of foreclosures, and my whole thing was going after pre-foreclosures. And so I would just go and knock on their door, and it was maybe like the third door I knocked. This really rough guy, had a bunch of tattoos. It was in Sandy. He was on his motorcycle. He started talking to me, and he didn't live there, or he wasn't the owner, but he lived there in the basement. And I would find out in the coming weeks that he was a heroin addict, and that the house was actually kind of overrun by about 10 different junkies. And the old man that lived in the house was just like an old Vietnam vet, and he was just letting them all like live there with him.
Wow.
And he was about a week away from foreclosure. So he had all kinds of, it was a crazy one to dive into. I really just like got thrown into the deep end because he had all kinds of credit card liens. He had a tax lien. So he had like 5 different liens we had to negotiate that week. And we eventually, and I didn't know any better, so he owed about $95,000 on the house. So I said, hey, I think we can give you about $2,500 and pay off these $20,000 worth of liens. So
let me stop you here. At this point, had you graduated from BYU?
Yes.
Okay, but as far as your real estate knowledge, I mean,
I had nothing. I knew nothing.
Okay, did you have any idea like what this house could be worth, should be worth?
No, I didn't know it was worth like $300,000 and it only needed like a $40,000 repair.
Okay, cool. So you're like negotiating with them without having a clue, really.
Yeah, I had no clue.
Okay, cool. Okay.
I mean, I was consulting with my partner at the time, who was, / my mentor.
Yeah.
And I think he was just loving it, right? He's like, oh, we're about to just steal this house.
Right.
Which we did. And I almost felt bad about it afterwards because I didn't really truly understood how much I stole it for.
Yeah.
But it was crazy. We had to it took 3 months to get all the heroin addicts out of the house. They were threatening my life. And we ended up getting them out, found needles everywhere in the house, flipped it, and we made, a good chunk of money. We held it for a long time because it took them a long time to get out of the house, but I still think we made like 90 grand on the house.
So that's crazy. So this is where now you're kind of going to kind of interrupt to kind of like get the flow of your whole story here. And then we'll go back to some more specific deals. But now you're kind of going like, I mean, because you don't have like a job, right? Like you're kind of going, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. What path am I going to take? Maybe it's real
I'm
estate.
still working a corporate job during this time.
You are? Okay. So you're double dipping right now.
Yeah, this is still, I'm still 100% full-time, making about 85 grand a year at my corporate job. And this is just, a hobby on the side.
Got it.
So we do that. Then the very next house I went, same thing, knocked on the door about 4 days before it went to foreclosure. And we ended up buying a seller finance duplex we didn't give them anything. We just took over the loan.
Got it.
But again, it wasn't fun because I got threatened again for about 3 months while I was trying to kick, druggies out of a drug house.
And how are you target? Like, did he give you some direction? Like maybe it was the notice of default list or whatever. Was he just like, get out there and just go knock these targeted houses?
I think I had heard on Bigger Pockets, like pre-foreclosures was a strategy you could do.
Got it.
So I was just going to the courthouse and just literally pulling the foreclosure notices off the wall and just going and like visiting the houses.
Yeah. So you're just like walking around blind almost, like deducting like, okay, this is probably the best place to find these. Maybe not the most efficient place, as obviously you've come to find out. But
sure,
what I love so far about this story is like, and I hear this over and over and over again with, people I talk to that end up being successful, is when they started, they actually had no clue what they were doing other than they knew they needed to act and do, right? And then you're also not afraid to just put yourself out there. One thing that I've already picked up on is, just posting on Bigger Pockets, like so this is one thing I want to drill down on a little later, like putting yourself out there and then also putting yourself out there in person. I mean, whoever's door knock knows that it could still be kind of intimidating, right? Like it's a pain in the neck kind of thing to do. So, and I know your personality, you're great, right? You can sit down around the table with anyone, right? So,
yeah, I figured it was, and what I learned, this kind of goes back to that video we watched at the beginning, is as I was going to these houses, one of the things I learned in my entrepreneurship program in college was that, you're always looking for opportunities, you're looking for problems to solve. And I was always looking for a way to be different. And so one of the things I started to put together when I was going and knocking on these doors is I would see mailers from like 20 different investors in the mailbox of these houses.
Yep.
And I would just pull out their mail because it would be stuff, and I'd look through it and it would be like insane. It'd be 2 or 3 letters from the same person just sitting there in the mailbox. And so I started putting together in my head, okay, like there's got to be a different way to reach these owners than just mailers. I mean, I know mailers are tried and true. They work. There's nothing wrong with them. But I was just thinking, maybe I can, differentiate myself by doing something a little slightly different than just something that's in the mailbox. I wanted to get more in their face.
Yeah.
So I was starting to put together ideas of maybe hiring like a sales team of door-to-door knockers, the same kind of people that do, pest control and alarm sales. And
what year was this?
This was 2016 when I was starting to try and come up with a strategy.
Cool. Okay.
So obviously we made pretty good money on our first couple deals. And I thought, hey, like this seems like something I could quit my day job over. And so in 2017, I made the plunge. I just said, hey, I think I can do this. I've got enough money saved. I'm going to quit my day job and just take a crack at this. And so I did that, and I spent the majority of 2017 trying to refine a strategy for, at the time, again, I still wasn't wholesaling. I was just trying to flip houses. So I would I would go get like $500 in crisp $1 bills. And I would go to these pre-foreclosures and leave a little note with a crisp $1 bill on the door. And just little things like that seemed to like increase my callback rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get, as opposed to getting like maybe a 1% callback rate, I was getting like a 25% callback rate. All because I left, a crisp $1 bill on their door. Now it got expensive fast, right? And I thought maybe I could think of a different way to do this without having to do $1 bills. But essentially, I just flipped like 3 or 4 houses in 2017. And then what got me into wholesaling was I had a really bad flip at the end of 2017 and at the beginning of 2018, where essentially I bought a house for around 500 grand from a wholesaler. It took a full year. At the end of it, my contractor, I gave him his last payment of 25 grand and I never saw him again. He just disappeared. So I still had to finish the house wherein I had just given my contractor 25 grand and he just ran off. I had to finish a bunch of the bad work that he had done. And when it was all said and done, I ended up making like 5 grand profit on a really expensive flip that I lost tons of sleep over. And it took me a whole year of my life. And then I found out later that the wholesaler made 75 grand wholesaling.
Yeah.
Now I don't fault him for that. I just thought it kind of clicked in my brain, you know, hey, maybe I'm not the best flipper in the world, and maybe I'm better at finding properties and I should switch to wholesaling.
Got it.
And that's essentially how I got into wholesaling, is I just had this. And I also had one more thing that it was a paradigm shift in my head. And that was, I had a really unique negotiation with a flip that I was selling. And essentially it was just a negotiation where the guy lowballed me by about almost 100 grand. I was desperate to sell this flip I had done. And so we just kind of went back and forth with 5 different addenda, meeting in the middle. And I still ended up selling for about 50 grand less than like list price. And so this all kind of was in my head. And I thought, you know, I'm spending all this time hustling after these pre-foreclosures, and you know, a lot of them were falling apart at the last minute. And I thought, on the MLS, everyone on the MLS wants to sell their house.
Right.
It's just a matter of negotiating the right price.
Right.
And
so this was all starting. I mean, the market's still pretty hot right now, right? Like 2016. I mean, it's been
very hot.
Right. So, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is you hear so many wholesalers say, like, there's no deals on the MLS, right? The only way to get good deals is to go direct to seller, spend all this time marketing. And obviously that way works phenomenally. What I've connected with you on is, in my investing history, I've pretty much, when I'm sourcing deals myself, I pretty much only get them on the MLS, right? It could be just because I'm lazy or whatever, and I don't want to put the systems in place to do like, you know, like the traditional today wholesaler does. But I've always found lots of deals on the MLS and a ton of success on the MLS. So this kind of takes me to where I wanted to talk about. But before we jump into this, let's just kind of loop. One thing that I thought was really valuable to me, and I think some people will get an idea or a tip or trick out of this, is, you know, it can become popular, like trying to do everything in the investing world. Like, well, I want to flip, I want to do, you know, but like you were flipping and you kind of found that for whatever reason, maybe it just wasn't your strongest tool, but you're maybe not the best flipper, right? Like, so
I'm a terrible flipper.
Talk about what challenges you had flipping that, you know, in a little bit more detail about what caused you to think like, all right, I'm doing the wrong thing. Do we lose you?
And so Matt, you just paused on me a little bit. So I'm going to wait a second to see if your screen unpauses. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I caught the last part of what you said. Basically, why was I not a good flipper? I mean, yeah. I could go for an hour about why I think flipping is actually not the best real estate strategy for the average Joe.
Give us 5 minutes of that and how it relates for you, because obviously, just like you're maybe not great at it, or I don't want to say you're not great at it, but it's not for you, right? Like there's other people that can't do what you've been doing because it's just not right for them. But that doesn't mean flipping's necessarily wrong. But I think by you explaining your side of the story as far as flipping, it'll give somebody a tip of like maybe how to do something a little different, or give some inspiration to transition to something different that they may be hitting roadblocks on, right? So instead of that hour, give us like a 5-7 minute, you know, from your perspective.
100%. So I'll just say this again. I do think that for some people, flipping is great. They have the right tools in place to really do a good job. But for me, these are some of the things I found that were really hard. Okay, for one, your capital, whatever that capital is, whether it's money you saved, money you borrowed from family or friends, it's tied up for, on the average, at least 6 to 9 months. So you're severely limited by scaling, by how much capital you have. And unless you came in with a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars, or you happen to know someone who had millions and millions of dollars and was willing to trust you, there's only so many flips you can do at one time. Again, this is for the average Joe, before you run out of capital. And then your capital is all tied up for 6 to 9 months in what I would consider a fairly risky investment. So whenever you're flipping a house, I mean, you're usually signing a personal guarantee for your hard money loan. So if things go bad, they can come after your personal assets. You have liability as far as, I know maybe one flipper that gets permits. Almost all flippers do their work without permits. And guess what? If you do a shitty job, then it's very possible, if you do enough flips, that someone's going to come back and sue you because, you know, someone fell through stairs that you put up into an attic, or, you know, something like that. So there's a ton of liability. And again, if you're doing it full time, you're waiting while all your money's tied up to get a paycheck. So you're kind of starving while you're waiting for your money to come in. And you hope that you pick the right flips. Now, again, I think that good flippers solve these problems by volume. They do lots of flips. They have access to money, either private money or some other source where they can borrow cheaply and hold for longer periods of time. So it's not to say that you can't do flipping and be successful at it, but I think that if you're not a contractor or someone that has personal knowledge of how to build a house and rehab a house, I think that you're going to run into a lot of difficulties, which I wasn't. I would get taken advantage of all day long by contractors because I didn't know the true cost of what it was to, you know, what it should cost to rehab a house, and what was good work and what was shoddy work. So those were all things I've learned, but I learned them very painfully. And so for me, I started having this paradigm shift that, hey, this is a very risky, very long, very kind of tough investment that maybe you're not the best at. You're really good at finding properties.
There you go.
So why don't you go out and wholesale? And when I started wholesaling, real estate really started taking off for me. I mean, I did 35 wholesales on the MLS my first year.
Hold on. You did 35 wholesales that were sourced from the MLS in your first year.
First year. I just started making offers. I said, hey, if I make 5 offers a day, I should be able, I said I should be able to close. I worked out all the numbers and said I should be able to close a certain amount of these as wholesales. And my goal was to make about $10,000 per wholesale. And that ended up being about what I averaged. I averaged about $9K per wholesale that year on the MLS.
Plus the commission on the deal?
No, I would not take a commission on the deal.
Okay.
I was just doing a wholesale fee. And that's kind of how that was one of the ways I was able to get properties a little bit cheaper, is I said I would offer the listing agents that I wasn't going to take a buyer agent commission.
So right about the time when I kind of started getting to know you better, I don't know, this was maybe a little after your heyday of those 35, but one thing I noticed when I was at your office is I think anyway, maybe you don't think you are, but I think you're a very organized person, right? And you're kind of thinking ahead to that next step. And I think that's confirmed when you said, like, okay, this is a game, like I need to make 5 offers a day. And then I think what you did, and fill in the gaps here, is you anticipated that you're going to make 5 offers a day, right? So you planned your day so that it would be really, really easy for you to make those 5 offers. And so I know you probably did. What I think this is cool too is everybody's going to have a different method for being efficient, right? There may be like a higher level efficiency, way to do it. But I remember seeing you had all these blank printed out repsies that were like organized in front of your face on your desk, right? And I remember asking you, I'm like, what do you, it's like, but it made it easier for you to write the offers because you were prepared and had everything right in front of you, right? Like such a small step. But I think a lot of us we stumble before we can get going because the simplest step we make so hard about just being organized and having a routine. And, anyway, talk about maybe your process and your mindset of, kind of going, because it's a grind, right? Like to get 35, you probably had to offer on 300.
It was a total grind. I would say, and essentially what I was doing is inserting myself as the buyer agent. I was saying, hey, I'm not going to take a buyer agent commission, but I was able to get it cheap enough that I could then roughly make what was the equivalent of a buyer agent commission.
Right.
And so I felt like I was hustling like a buyer agent would be hustling for my wholesales. And, you know, I did things to make it a little more streamlined. Like you said, all my offers were sight unseen. And it wasn't until I got a bite where someone either countered me or called me back and asked, hey, have you seen the house? Then I would say, you know, something to the effect of, I drove the property, but I haven't seen it. And, you know, but I flip a lot of houses and, you know, we're going to be gutting the entire inside. But all my offers were sight unseen, and that allowed me to, you know, not have to go see every single house. And then I would only go see the ones where I felt like we were starting to counter each other and I needed to get a better idea of what was going on inside the house. So I did that.
Here, Mike, this will help answer this, what you're going to talk about. Mike in the chat asks, what was your criteria for which houses to offer, you know, on the MLS? So like, how were you identifying, and it may be obvious to you, but just drill down a little bit more detail. How were you determining which houses to offer on? What kind of formula were you using, or how were you sorting through that?
Yeah, so I mean, it was really primitive. The first time I went to the MLS, I just did a search for everything in Salt Lake County that was under $200,000. And within a minute, I saw a property on State Street in like 3100 South, a pretty decent property that was listed at like 135. And it had an issue that could be fixed pretty quickly. And so I made an offer on it and I sold that one. I think I made like $6,000.
So would you offer it kind of like figuring, okay, this is the ARV, maybe 70% of ARV, or are you just more of a gut instinct? Like this is maybe what a wholesale flipper would pay?
No, I would go in based on flips I had done in the area. So I already knew what like maybe a 2,000 square foot house in Salt Lake in certain areas was selling for. And so I was looking in those areas and then offering, like you said, roughly, I think I was doing it based on like 125,000 less than ARV.
125,000 less than ARV.
Now that's on certain properties. I had 2 MLS methods. This is what I found. Lowballing only works. Lowballing is like a Hail Mary, right? You're not going to make a lot of Hail Mary passes. So you can make a lot of lowball offers, but those aren't going to come through, you know, but they're going to very seldomly come through for you. And so what I realized is that the properties that I was getting, or was doing the best on, were ones that people listed on the market that were already well under ARV. And so I could offer either full price or just a little over full price and still be able to mark it up 10,000 to a wholesaler and make money.
Got it.
And so I was looking for people that were already listing their houses well under ARV, well under market value. And that was either because it was trashed inside or it had foundation crack. So they were forced to sell it for well under. But a lot of these were only on the market for a day, and I tied them up and was still able to make 10,000.
So yeah, I know specifically, I think of a couple where I ended up offering on some, and then I'd look when it closed, and it's like, oh, John Prince, he offered like $500 more. Okay, yeah. So Joey Webb has a question. If you were approaching a deal on the MLS, how did you wholesale it? Did you use hard money and double close, or just to sign the contract?
Okay, so this is a little before the division started cracking down on wholesalers. My contract, I would send over, because I'm an agent, I would send over an assignment addendum for the seller to sign. Now, I didn't have it filled in with my wholesale fee or the buyer number 2 yet, but I actually had them sign an official, division assignment addendum. And then it kind of came out that, hey, that's not the best way to do it. The division doesn't like you doing it that way. I never got in trouble for it, but I know a couple other wholesalers that were doing similar things that did get in trouble for it. And so anything after that, I was pretty much either closing on it and then selling, or I was just disclosing to the seller that I was going to sell it and make a markup.
So what I also liked about John when I first saw his contract was it was just like you disclosed everything, right? Like even though it maybe wasn't the perfect way to do it, you were disclosing to everybody what you were doing, right? Like it was, so you didn't need to try and hide your piece of what you were doing. As long as you disclosed to everybody from day one, like yeah, it never made anybody uncomfortable. It helped the seller get comfortable with it, and they weren't in the dark about what your true intentions were, So anyway, that just my 2 cents on having seen your contracts.
Honestly, that's what I found the longer I'm in real estate. You don't really need to hide things from people. You can just straight up tell them, hey, I have got a really large list of cash buyers that I'm friends with, and I might sell this to one of them and make some money.
Perfect. I love that. So simple. The other thing I love there is you ought to make a shirt, for your, like, lowballing is like a Hail Mary pass,
It is, yeah.
You do have that mentality, right? Like, I want to get as low as possible, but that's not the way you keep scoring touchdowns, right? You got to kind of grind it through, and maybe over, pay list price or whatever.
Yeah. And then I noticed, what started happening is that I did about 35 wholesales and on the MLS, and then people started getting on the MLS. I know it sounds crazy, but there really wasn't, when I started doing it, there really wasn't a ton of investors that were turning to the MLS for deals. And so after about a year of doing that, again, I felt like I needed to iterate again because the MLS was starting to get crowded. And so I just didn't feel like I wanted to compete with other investors that were doing the exact same thing I was doing. And so I switched again to an idea that I always wanted to try, which is essentially, I paid a guy to go and put sticky notes on doors. I ordered about 25,000 sticky notes, which is cheaper than mailers. And I paid people probably $15 an hour to go out and put roughly 1,000 of those on doors each day.
Yeah.
And
this is about when I met you, when you were doing this.
And I really started doing well when I did this strategy. I still think it's a great strategy for anyone who's not doing it. Again, people started kind of doing it, but I would just put a sticky note on their door, and it essentially looked like this. Just had my number, said full price offer for your house. Looks kind of like handwriting. And I got a ton of wholesales and flips off of that.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so I was doing wholesaling, and I could have continued to this day to that strategy. I was making a really healthy living doing that. But then around the end of, I want to say it was around 2018, I heard Jordan Atkin speak at, I think it was the UV RIA.
Okay, I'm gonna pause you there because that's where I want to finish up this last half of the call.
Okay.
But I do want to answer a couple questions that are still on the chat. Maria wants to know, in general, how would you structure your offers to the seller? Like as far as terms, like due diligence, close, like, earnest money, that kind of thing. How did you structure it?
So one of the ways I felt like I differentiated myself is at when I was doing the MLS deals, I knew that I knew I had buyers in my back pocket for some of these deals. And so I did a 7-day close,
okay,
which is a little shorter, or actually a lot shorter than what a lot of wholesalers do. So I said I can close in 7 days. I think I did 3 days of due diligence and about $5,000 of earnest money. And that also got me, I was able to shave off a few $1,000s more from the seller just by being able to close in 7 days.
And real quick, how did you build your buyers list? Did you do anything unique or different there?
So I did a couple things. I only had about 200 people on my list to start, and it was just random people that had given me their card at Slaria and different events. But I found another wholesaler. I started going to Slaria and really trying to build my list. I got up to about 350. And then I found another wholesaler who was about at my same level. He had a list of about 350 people. And we realized that we had almost no overlap in our list.
Oh, cool. And
so we decided to just swap lists. And by my list doing that immediately doubled with, about 350 people that I didn't even know. And there were some great buyers on that list. John Maxim was one of those buyers. He ended up buying about a fair amount of deals from me. There was Mike Burney was on that list, who I'm now, pretty decent friends with. And, we do deals together. So there was a lot of people on the list that I just ended up calling and introducing myself to and sending deals out to. And I would highly recommend that as a way of growing your list. If you can find other people that have lists, just offer to swap.
That's awesome. And then you kind of just answered this, but to wrap up on this segment, JR is asking, who ended up being your typical buyer? Like an end user, or was it typically a rehabber? It was a
rehabber every time.
Okay, cool. Okay, right on. Pick up where you were. You're at Slaria or Utah RIA. You're listening to Jordan Atkin, and you're kind of having a paradigm shift.
Yeah, so Jordan Atkin gave a whole presentation about he was doing these entitlement deals where he would buy land, he would get it subdivided so that he could do, maybe it was a single family home. He would buy the land and then get the city to approve, building 3 townhomes on that piece of land. And he was able to create, a lot of value by doing so and getting the land approved for those projects. And then he would sell that, essentially wholesale that to someone to do the deal.
Got it. So this is about what you said, 2017, 2018?
Yeah, this was probably the beginning of 2018. And I thought, or I'm sorry, this was about the end of 2018. And I thought, that sounds like an interesting idea. And again, I was hustling really hard to get my wholesales. I mean, I was really working to get those 35 wholesales I did in 2018.
Right.
And so I thought, man, if I could do one of these land entitlement deals where I buy the land at $10,000 a door and I can sell it at $20,000 a door, and I can do, a 35 unit subdivision, I can do essentially a whole year of wholesaling in one land entitlement deal. So I just kind of had that thought, and I said, hey, I always like the saying, add zeros, it's maybe just add a zero. It's not necessarily harder. So I thought, instead of buying for 100, 200,000, I'm going to start trying to buy these deals that are buying the land for $1 or $2 million and see what I can do. And so Matt was, you were my lender on both my deals that I did last year that were land subdivisions, and they were not perfect. They didn't go, I had to learn all kinds of things about working with the city. But I would say overall they were a success. And
so let's go, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The first one, I believe it was the first one, your deal that you did on Fort Union, and I know you posted about it on Facebook and stuff like that, so it's out there. But and you got, if I remember right, there were 4 parcels with 4 different owners, right? Or was it 3 parcels with 3 different owners?
Yeah. So there was a parcel that was on the MLS that was in a mixed use zone.
That's right. So the first lead you had was, again, on the MLS, right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, cool.
And we went to the city and we said, how many units? We gave them a site plan. And if you're not familiar, a site plan is just, you have an architect or someone do a really rough drawing of how many units you can get on the parcel. It has, it usually has a road and units, and it's very basic. And so we took a site plan to the city and we set up a meeting with the city planner, and we said, hey, we've got this, site plan for 20 units. Will this work? And they said, no, we think you can only do about 10 units on this parcel.
Did you have it under contract yet, or are you just doing your due diligence before making an offer?
Just doing a due diligence before I even tied it up.
Okay.
So then we just said, hey, there was 3 other parcels right next to it along Fort Union. So I went ahead after that meeting and tied it up. And then we had, I think 2 months or 3 months of due diligence, and we went to work trying to get the other parcels to sell to us.
And
because
so when you tied up the first,
we knew if we could get the other parcels to sell to us at a decent price, that we could put together a project that would make sense.
Okay, so with the first parcel, because I kind of know how it ended up turning out, you still didn't quite know how many more you might get or how many more would be needed to justify the price of the first parcel, right? Like at face value, that first parcel maybe looked a little bit like by itself, it's not going to do anything at the value that it was at, right?
Correct. Yeah. And again, the reason I think that it's okay to do that, and when you're doing some of these land deals, is that, you give yourself typically 3 months of due diligence. And so you have time to put together other parcels and see if you can make a deal out of it. And if you can't make a deal out of it, then okay, then I'm going to let go of that piece of land.
And the seller might be more willing to do that because they already have in their head, oh, there could be a potential here that's different than just a single family home, right? Because they knew it's in the mixed use zoning. And so, because otherwise it's going to be hard to get, 3 months of due diligence if you're not aiming for something other than, if you're not aiming
Yeah,
for
we
like a
paid him
development
I
project.
think we paid him pretty close to full price.
Yep.
And it was a really crappy house that was on the parcels he was selling. And so he wasn't going to sell it to an end buyer anytime soon. And so,
and this is like, so people can drive it in their head. This is Fort Union and about 16th to 17th East, right?
that's right.
Okay, cool. All right, so you got the one. Now you're strategically going after neighboring properties that at the time were not listed on the MLS. How did you go about that in contacting them and assembling the rest of these parcels?
I had someone working for me as a full-time property finder, and I had him go knock on the doors of the owners.
Got it.
We do a lot of good old-fashioned door knocking.
I love it though, but this is the cool thing is it works. Like, you might not be able to scale as quickly as maybe someone that's using like massive tech or whatever, right? But like,
well, in these land deals, I mean, you can do 2 or 3 land deals a year. You're not going to be typically doing, even huge developers aren't sometimes doing a whole lot more than that,
right.
So
but I love it. Like, you don't need, it's like that video that we introed with. It's like, you don't need an email, right? Like, you just need to know that they're selling apples for $5, and then you got to figure out how to sell, for $10, and then rinse and repeat, right? So this is what I love about your story.
That video really did resonate with me because, I mean, I've always just taken action. I believe in just taking action. I believe, fire and then aim, right? Like, you just need to be doing things. If you're doing things and you're always running, even if you're running in the wrong direction, you can quickly start running in the right direction. But if you're not running at all, then you're not going to get there. And so I just believe in taking lots of action, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. I don't believe in being stupid. I think you should always be trying to minimize your risk. And again, ever since I switched to wholesaling, what I do now is just a form of wholesaling. So for the most part, my risk is very low because I'm almost always within due diligence, and I never go past my due diligence, and I never close on a property unless I have a damn good reason for it.
Yeah. So no, I love it. And protect yourself, protect your contract, protect your earnest money. So then how many other properties on this Fort Union did you end up piecing together?
We pieced together 4 parcels total. I think together they were about $1.2 million worth of property.
Yep.
We put down, and Matt might remember this better than me, but we ended up putting down a couple $100,000 and then got a hard money loan from Matt.
Yep. And you did, I mean, the unique structure of it is I wasn't available for you on the first half of it. So you actually got a private hard money loan from someone else on the first couple pieces, because you did have to take them down in, not at the same time, because you did end up having different timelines with your different sellers.
And again, I would never do it that way again.
Right.
Now that I have done a few of these, I would never do what I did on this deal, where we closed on the land, a couple of the parcels before closing on the other parcels, and without all of the due diligence that we needed done to know how many units we were going to get. So we just kind of dove into the deep end, and it worked out, but I would not recommend that for anyone doing this. You want to know very clearly from the city how many units you're going to get before you even think about buying land for a subdivision deal.
I love it. Yeah, because the risk would be obviously is you buy 2 of the 4 parcels, somewhere down the road, the other 2 people decide at the last minute they don't want to sell to you, or something weird happens, or you can't get the financing for it, and then you're left with 2 parcels. This is exactly what happened to me in 2007 on a 10-unit townhome project in Mill Creek. Is I owned one half the land. My land partner that was going to partner with me on the second half of the land, 2007, 2008 came, and he got cold feet and bailed. So what ended up happening is I had completely overpaid for a piece of land that I couldn't do anything with other than, you know, it just being a single family home because I didn't have the complementary piece to make the density work for the 10 units. And so the same thing really would have happened to you at Fort Union, but what you ended up with was 4 pieces that you ended up buying at different stages, but ended up owning control of all 4 of those. And the final result, we're going to maybe get to the end here because we're going to run out of time a little bit, but you ended up with 4 parcels that ended up
23
yielding
units.
23 units.
Yeah.
And give us the numbers really quick. You ended up being into the land
We were into the land 1.2 million, like 1.225 million, something like that. We sold the land for 1.79 or something million like this. So about a $500,000 markup. And then we had hard money costs and about $50,000 worth of architecture and civil engineering costs. I think all in, I think our profit was roughly like 400,000.
Okay, so that's great. So that's the end. Now, a couple questions on the details in between. Do you know how to do the architecture? Did you map out the site plans? Were you sitting there slaving away?
No, again, my whole philosophy in life is I believe in choosing your partners carefully and then partnering with people on deals if you can help it.
I love it.
I like spreading the risk out. You're partnering with someone. So I ended up partnering with an architect who had a decent amount of money. And we probably had a month of conversations before he thought this was even a strategy he was interested in.
Perfect.
He was actually building townhomes, and I said, hey, why don't we entitle them and then try and sell them at that point? And it did not click in his head that this is something that you could do. And so we just kept talking. And then eventually he said, I think I want to try this with you. And, so I actually, not on this deal. On this deal, I partnered with some friends of mine, but on subsequent deals, I ended up partnering with the architect, and he brought in all the money for the deal. He donated his architecture costs, which can be quite expensive. If you've ever had to hire an architect for anything, you know that it gets expensive quickly.
But without his involvement, whether it was hired on this first one or a partner on the subsequent ones, you don't have a chance assembling this land, because you have to have, obviously, very detailed, skillful plans and site plans and density calculations and floor plans that are going to be marketable, and
just the knowledge of talking to the city. Yes. I didn't know the lingo, and so right. if I went in without him to the city and was trying to talk to the city I went into this with very little knowledge, and so I needed him to talk the talk so that the city felt like we were reputable developers and wanted to work with us.
The other key to this project was you targeted an area where you weren't targeting an area that only allowed for, 2 single family homes. You were targeting an area that already in their city code allowed for 23 to 26 townhomes, depending on how you carve the road out. And, so you weren't asking for like a Hail Mary from the city. You were just asking for, help and guidance in conforming to what they're already anticipating to go on that land. And that's the beauty of it, right?
And that's part of our strategy now that we're more sophisticated in how we do this is we already have identified zones in different cities that we know the city is either looking for development in, or we have a very clear idea of what the rules are in that zone and how many units we can build per acre, as long as it's not, a really funky shaped piece of land. And so we then are highly targeted within those zones and doing deals in those areas. And so like right now, we have a 60 unit project in Clearfield that the city has already basically approved for 60 townhomes. And then we have a 70 unit townhome deal in South Salt Lake. And both of those were found because we already knew before we made offers on the land exactly what we could do in those zones, what the zoning allowed for in those parcels. So
you've kind of answered just to keep the, everybody that's on this call involved. Jared Hall, who, you've met, I think, and, he's a beyond fantastic architect and guy that deals with the city as well. Are most of your projects townhome or multifamily or single family?
All of them have been townhomes so far. We have had, the one we have 70 townhomes on does allow for multifamily, but it would take almost an extra 2 years.
When you say multifamily, you mean more like apartments or
Like
just even?
apartments.
Okay.
It's a conditional use, and it's in a city where it's very hard to get things done that aren't a permitted use. And so we opted to just go the easy route because I didn't want to be stressed out for the next 2 years.
Perfect. Okay. Esteban has a question. What do you look for in a partner?
I think number one is honesty. I am currently in a lawsuit with an old partner where we owned a property together, and long story short, this person just removed me from title out of nowhere. And so I think honesty and integrity is absolutely number one, what I look for. I want to know that I can trust that person. I want to know that when things hit the fan, that person has a level of personal integrity that they are thinking about not just themselves, but me as well.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And then number two is, what are they bringing to the table? I mean, probably the things I'm looking for, do they have money to bring the deal, and do they have experience and expertise to bring to the deal?
Especially experience and expertise that you don't have.
Correct. So like for me in development deals, the kind of people I'm looking to partner with are builders or, people that have money that want to syndicate on a deal, because those are two things that I don't, that I need a lot of to do these deals, because when eventually we're going to take one of these down and we're going to build, a 250 unit apartment building, it's going to cost $30-40 million.
Awesome.
And so it's going to, require a lot of capital. And so I'm starting to build those relationships now so that I don't always have to sell these deals. Eventually I can be a partner in the deal.
Awesome. Okay. So you're progressing, throughout your real estate career, and we got about 7-8 minutes left. So I just kind of want to, summarize some of this, which I think is super fascinating. You get into real estate, knocking doors, kind of don't know what you're doing, but you're just not afraid to not know what you don't know, and you don't really care. You're just like, you're knocking on a door, you're asking some, heroin user if he wants to sell his house, and you have no clue how you're going to get the people out of there, but it ends up being a huge win, which ultimately dominoes into you really figuring out how to wholesale from the MLS, which is kind of counterintuitive to this whole new wave of like, this is the coaching system and process of how to do it, right? Like you've got to go, you just kind of like, this seems like it makes sense. It's a little different. I'm just doing it, right? And then it's like, okay, how else can I do this? Oh, I'm going to put stickers on people's, doors, right? And then I love what you said, like, you still didn't necessarily know what you were doing with the land development until probably, 3/4 of the way in on the Fort Union deal, right? And so, but you're always asking questions, networking, and I think you're really good at admitting when you don't know what you're doing, and or like what you don't know what the next step is. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
It's okay. I didn't know what I was doing, and the thing is, if you just admit to people you don't know what you're doing, it's better, because eventually when you talk to someone who's smart, they're going to find out what you know and don't know in about 3 minutes.
Yes. So I love it. So you're just, again, it goes back to honesty and transparency. And that's, I think, been one of your, other than just taking massive action, like you said, and just jumping in, if you're not running, then you're not doing anything. And even if you're running the wrong direction, you can still adjust where you're going. So I think that's awesome. Stacy has a question, and this was actually going to be my next follow-up question. So how did you end up getting your buyers on these to buy these projects from you? Because just to clarify, you didn't sell these as built projects. You sold these as either entitled, meaning the planning commission in the city had basically stamped off saying, this is approved now to build on as 23 units or whatever, 43 units. Who did you end up selling, or not specifically, but like, how did you find that buyer? Because you obviously didn't put it up on the MLS, or I can't remember, did you? Or how did you end up sourcing these?
I put these on LoopNet. Okay. And I paid about $500 a month for their promoted ad. And that was worth its weight in gold. I essentially, on my very first deal, got so many calls from developers based on my LoopNet ad that I just paid a lot of money so that it was always at the top of each search. And I just it's just like the same method with wholesaling. You keep a list of all these buyers for future deals. And so now I have a pretty decent running list of developers, both in-state and out of state that are, and I know exactly which ones are looking for, you know, which ones build townhomes, which ones build multifamily. So I would say the way, if you're beginning, if you want to find deals, is spend about $500 a month on your first deal to promote it on LoopNet, and you'll get a ton of commercial buyers. You'll get a ton of brokers that call you. Brokers are a great way to sell these deals. Develop relationships with some of the bigger commercial brokers in town, and you can send them a deal, and they have people in their back pocket that are just developers that are just hungry for deals, even in this current environment.
Dude, I love that. I love that. That is, man, there has been so much gold in this call. We got about 5 minutes left. I know we reviewed before, like, have you thought of anything that you wanted to talk about that was super important that maybe we didn't naturally discuss?
I don't think so. I mean, I just think, you know, like I said, I don't feel like I feel like I'm a good investor, but again, I don't feel like I'm probably any further down the road, or maybe only a little bit further down the road than some people on this call. And I would just say it's all about, like you said, admit what you don't know. Don't be afraid to do big deals just because they're big. You know, there's ways to mitigate your risk and still do big deals. And I don't know, I just believe in going for it. You know, we have one life to live, and I like many people on this call want to make it big in real estate. And I just think you go for it. You're going to make mistakes along the way. You got to take calculated risks. And like I said, just take massive action, because if you're always sitting, like, I've heard this from maybe 3 or 4 different investors, and I always feel like it's the best advice every time I hear it. And they always say, you know, hey, what's the best time to get into real estate? Today.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that's the same thing with, you could say that about a lot of things in real estate. What's the best time to start taking it to the next level? Today. You know, because no matter when you decide to do it, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have to learn, and you might as well get on that right now, you know. And
I love it.
so,
and no, I love it. So John, thanks so much for coming on the call. I wish we could do a little bit more, because the next deal that you did that I was, you know, a part of was how many units on 33rd, and people can message you after if they want to know.
yeah, it was 36 units.
36 units on 3300 South. I think John was in and out of that thing in less than a year, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
Got hard money. You were essentially zero money out of pocket, other than some pursuit costs and architectural fees.
That's
but
right.
Essentially, you were about a $970,000 purchase, I think. No, or maybe it was $1.2 million.
It was like, I think it was like 1.1 million.
1.1, almost no money out of pocket. Similar strategy where you tied down the first parcel and then kind of infiltrated the neighboring parcels, you know, made sure you could do, you know, through the city what you were trying to do, found a buyer, you were in and out of it. And I believe that one was even a little bit of a better profit than your Fort Union, and all those were within
sold
the
that
same
one
year.
for 1.75, similar sales price, but we made about a couple $100,000 more.
I love it. I love it. So yes, John, are we cool if I type in your phone number here?
Yeah, please. Anyone give me a call. I'm happy to talk to anyone about this stuff.
What is it really quick? Just say it and I'll type it in too.
It's 801-913-1505.
801-913-1505.
I'm happy to, if you find a deal, I'm happy to partner with you on a deal. We've got our team in place, and our machine's pretty well oiled doing this now. So if you find a deal and it feels too big or scary, would love to partner with you or talk to you about how to approach it.
Awesome. Thanks, John. We're going to sign off with that. Everybody, thanks for joining in, and have a great rest of your Wednesday, and be safe out there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.